Today we are talking RDS, Amazon databases. Hey, there's Tom's Tech Show. Today we are talking about Amazon RDS. They have their database system that you can put your database in the cloud and be able to run it on Amazon hardware. You can, if you want, create your own EC2 instance and just load a simple database on there if you want. You can do those kinds of things, but Amazon already has kind of this taken care of, and we can create databases in their infrastructure with some added resilience and things like that. So one thing we want to do today, this is pretty easy just to go through and click here. We can click the button and create, click what type of database you want and follow some steps. But we want to do this in PowerShell using the Amazon AWS API. So we can see here you can make different kinds of databases. Amazon Aurora obviously is the one that they prefer, but today we're going to be making MariaDB, and it's pretty straightforward. There were some things in PowerShell that get kind of tricky that you have to do before you can create the database. If you don't have the switches correct, then you'll get an error that says, or the database will only be able to be created in the default VPC. But if we want to do it in a different VPC, we've created our own VPC and we want to put that database there. There's some other steps that we have to do. Okay, so let's jump into the code here. This is a piece of code that I have that I've taken from a gigantic controller that runs a big infrastructure, and whenever we need to create a new database, one of the techs can go to a simple little web page and just say, I need a database, and hit go, and then boom, it starts running this code. Okay, so of course, one of the things that I do that I'm always needing to do is to tag all of the pieces of our database. So that's where we get we have to pull up the object Amazon RDS Model Tag. So this is similar to some of the other tags. So we give it a key and a value, and then we can apply those to our database. So here we set the key to name, and this is we're giving it the same name as our VPC. Then we create another one that's billing, and I'm calling it infrastructure. So that way I know when I get my Amazon billing, I can know exactly where these databases are located and what customers are using them. So I also create some naming here in the script, and I also have a function that I found on the internet that creates unique passwords. So every database is going to have its own unique password, so that if one database gets hacked or accessed somehow, they don't have access to all of the databases. This is potentially going to be, customer data, so we want it to have a definite unique password from everything else. So the one thing you have to do if you want to be able to put this RDS instance in the non-default VPC is you have to call new RDS-DB subnet group. You have to create one of these. So I'm going to create our group name, give it a group description, and then I'm going to include the subnets that I want in this database to reside in. So these subnets will determine what VPC the instance is launched in. And of course I added my tags at the end so that I tag that subnet group so that I know what it's being billed as. Okay, so now we're going to launch our database instance. So that's this big, huge, long stack of code here. So let's kind of go through it. So we want new RDS DB instance. We're going to allocate storage 30, so it's going to have 30 gigabytes of storage for the data. Next flag is backup retention period. So you can set here when you launch it how many backups you want it to keep. So this is going to be keeping 3 days back worth of backups. Then multi area is going to be equal to true, so we're going to have multi-zones. So we specified here in our new DB RDS subnet group, we specified 2 subnets, so that's putting us in, we have to add the flag multi-AZ in order to tell it to be in those 2 different subnets. Okay, and then we're going to have a DB instance class. So this is the size of box that Amazon is going to launch, the size of the instance Amazon is going to launch to run our database. So if it's a huge, gigantic database, you want these, more throughput, more data, you're going to want these to be bigger. The cost does escalate. As it runs up, we have many thousands of connections running on T2 mediums, and they seem to do fairly well. So you can change this as it goes on and update and scale up your box. So I typically start with a medium, which does fairly well. Okay, so now we need a DB instance identifier. This is going to be basically the name of our DB instance inside of AWS. So we're going to then we tell it the engine. Okay, so what's the engine? What are we making? Are we making an Aurora, a MySQL, a Microsoft SQL? For this example, we're going to be creating a MariaDB. We give it a username, and then we give it our password that we set in the that we generated up here at the top. Okay. So then we need a security group. So we need to be able to provide access. Everything access is limited by security groups. So if we have a specific security group created for databases, then we can apply that. That can make it so that only specific hosts can reach the database ports. If you want to temporarily have this be available outside while you do maintenance and set things up initially, you would need to include your host names and your local networks in this security group so that one can access it. Then we flag it with storage encrypted. If this is going to be a database instance that is going to include customer data, sensitive data, then you definitely want to encrypt it so that at rest the database is encrypted. Okay, and I also have the publicly accessible right now is false. So how in AWS, right, you have kind of the private networks inside AWS, which are typically like 172.31.0.0 or 172.31.16.0. Those IP addresses are not open to the internet. So if you want to be able to access this and make it publicly accessible, then you flip this to true and you will get a DNS URL that is publicly available and able to be accessed from outside. Typically I don't do this to start so that later if someone needs access to it, then I can either turn it on or we can provide a remote desktop instance into an EC2 instance that's inside the network already that they can access this so that can always be set to false for security so it doesn't accidentally get left on. Taking a swig of Avengers iced tea. Okay. So then we go to our DB subnet group name. So this is the subnet group name that we determined up here in the top. So this provides the areas, the zones that the database instances are going to be created. Since I told this to be multi-zone, so I told it here multi-zone equal to true, it's going to actually make 2 DB instances. It's going to create 2 DB2 medium boxes. They're going to be in 2 different zones. They're going to be set up so that the data is load balanced between them and that it will run. If one is failing, then the other one will work and you can restart and recover and all those kinds of things. So that is important for production workloads. It basically doubles the cost almost because you're running 2 instances, right? But okay. So then I come down here. I need to know before I do anything else and start pulling information. We need to wait until this database instance is ready. So we do some looping here. We can do a getDB instance from our identifier that we got when we created the instance, and just check if the database is ready. If the database is available, then we break out of our loop. Sometimes for these, it may take 30 minutes. It has to build the database, both instances, and then set up the MariaDB server inside them, and then once it gets to that point, then it creates a backup of the database initially to start, so you always have initial database backup, and then once it gets through that, then it will finally tell you, okay, I'm ready. Okay, so that gets me an endpoint. So I'll need this endpoint if I'm publishing this to applications. I have a database that is behind this that stores this information, so I need that endpoint so I can give that to my application developer or publish that to a table that allows other developers to reach in and grab this endpoint so that they know where to go and read and write their data to. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do, up here we saw we were able to add the tag to the subnet group right within the command line. Within the create command, we were able to add those tags. We can't do that with the RDB instance because it's not created yet. It needs to go through this whole huge process. So then we do add Rds Tag to resource. So we take the database and the identifier, and we add the two tags to that database. This goes into billing so that we can set up, we know what customers are on what databases, we know what charges we're accruing from Amazon, so that when we do our end of month billing, we know if we're going to be back charging people or if we're doing a cost analysis for, is this project costing us more money than we're charging the customer? Do we need to up our charge per seat? Do we need to, if it's an app, do we need to, subscription app or something like that, do we need to up our subscription price so that we know, that we're going to actually be making money in our billing? Okay. So that gets everything done, up and running for an Amazon RDS instance. You can play around with the different flags, deploy an Aurora DB, MySQL DB, different types. We just happen to use Maria. But this code will be put onto my Bitbucket that is linked from the end of this video and from my website, tomstechshow.com, where you can find all this stuff and links to everything that I do. I do make videos like this. I do 3 to 4 videos a week on computing, on a lot of AWS because that's what I'm kind of deep in right now. But there's some VMware stuff, there's some regular Microsoft computing stuff, maybe even some Linux stuff, definitely virtualization type things, all in there. That kind of stuff. I also do videos on movies and TV shows that I like the Marvel Universe and the Orville, different shows like that. I do also photography things. I have my camera that I take out and shoot different pictures. I'm going this Thursday out to one of the islands out here to take some pictures. That should be pretty fun. I'll try and do some videos while I'm there to just kind of show what I'm doing and stuff out there. So if you like any of that kind of stuff, then subscribe to my channel. That gets you all of that into your YouTube feed. You can also, if this helps you out, then like the video. Then I know that it helps you. That helps me to know what videos to create more of, so that to help kind of direct this channel, so that the things that you like, I know that you'll like, and then I can move forward with creating more of this type of content. All right. Well, thanks for watching this one today, and take care.